Hello and welcome to episode 289 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. Like most of you, I went to bed early on Sunday. I was like, you know what? I think this is going to be good. A lot of my teams look prepared for the playoffs. Christian McCaffrey's rolling. There's no way that the Browns are going to put up 35 plus fantasy points from both Judy and Winston and Njoku. Everybody just going crazy. And then I wake up and here we are, so we're here to help you guys get through, navigate those situations, talk about Christian McCaffrey, talk about some of these crazy playoff scenarios, because this is the last week. This is your final week to get ready. Nobody better to chop it up with than my main man, Snoog.
I don't think I'll ever recover from last night, Dad. I lost 3 bye-week teams to Jameis Winston being a friggin' Peyton Manning in his prime and Jerry Jeudy being like Terrell Owens. Man,
Jameis has been wild.
David Njoku dropped like 32. I literally played those 3 and teams. I had a comfortable 50-plus point lead in all 3 of those leagues.
Yeah.
And every single one of them had at least 2 of Jameis, Judy, and Njoku, and Bo Nix. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. Like, in the one league, I needed Sutton to get me like 18.
And
nope.
Nope. And that was the other thing is I didn't pay attention to that game. I woke up and I'm like, oh, Broncos scored 41. Cortland Sutton, all these other guys must have gone ham. Not so much. Jameis Winston in smash settings, 41.7 fantasy points with the 497 yards. Honestly, 4 touchdowns. And I had a guy he was trying to sell him to me for a first after that. And I'm like, okay, all right, ease it up here. Jameis Winston is that guy where you want to buy him right now for a pair of thirds, a late second, because he's just going to put up fun fantasy points the rest of the year. He's got a tough week at week 14 against Pittsburgh. But I mean, after doing this against Denver and then he posting 31 against the Saints, posting 30 against the Ravens. Now you look at it, he's got the Bengals in week 16, Miami in week 17, and Kansas City in week 15. That's not bad. If you are really down and out and, you made it into the playoffs, but you're missing like Dak Prescott and Trevor Lawrence, I have no problem going out there and buying Jameis Winston. The other guy that I've been buying, and, you might call me crazy because I've just been buying him cheap. I've loved him throughout the process. Benching Will Levis has been the best thing for him since he's come back. He's had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in all 3 games. He is now, over that time, 7 touchdowns. That's 7th in the league. He also has, he's 15th in fantasy points per game. Snoog, his playoff schedule, and this is why I'm advocating going out and buying Nick Westbrook-Akine cheap, Tony Pollard cheap, like all your Tennessee Titans, Calvin Ridley cheap. They get the Jaguars in week 14. Give up the most to the quarterback and wide receiver. The Jaguars in the championship game in week 17. And I'm saying you got to be down and out. But I mean, I've made a trade yesterday I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The Bengals in week 16, the Bengals give up the 3rd most fantasy points. And those games are just going to be crazy high scoring. And then the Colts, who give up the 10th most. So, I mean, Will Levis' playoff schedule is absolutely juicy. It ties into what the main idea of this show is going to be, and we're talking Christian McCaffrey. So I lost Christian McCaffrey on a team in Zoltan's league. I have, and you're gonna love this. This is such a smash accept type running back room. I have Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, and I didn't have Christian McCaffrey all year. And I'm just like, all right, well, we'll get there when we get there. You know what I mean? Like, he'll come back, and he comes back, and now it's like he was a luxury to my team. So a lot of you guys are in that space where you've built your team. We didn't even need Christian McCaffrey. He was just an extra. But if you have a trade deadline, especially this particular league, I traded Christian McCaffrey, Keaton Mitchell, and a 3rd, and I got Zay Flowers and Will Levis. And to me, I'm ecstatic because I think Christian McCaffrey, his injury here, is going to put him out, obviously, the rest of the season. But there's going to be some, he's coming back next year. He's going to be turning 30 next year. That value is going to dip. I think Zay Flowers is worth more personally. And if I can get in a league where you can't make any trades once the playoffs start, Will Levis has a juicy schedule. So I have no problem throwing a 26-second, a 27-second, or in this particular trade, just getting him thrown in there because it's a ton of upside. On the Nick Westbrook-Akine, Snoog, 20 receptions over the last 8 weeks, which isn't that many, on 38 targets, 8 touchdowns. since he's had, this is crazy. So over the last 6 weeks, he's had 92% snap share. He is a top 13 wide receiver in the NFL because of those touchdowns, and he has a juicy slate. So, I don't want to talk a ton about Westbrook Ikiti or Levis. There's add-ins. But let's talk Christian McCaffrey. So you're a contender. What are you doing right now? Right? Like a lot of people are like, should I hold for next year, Dad? Should I sell for whatever I can? One guy was like, I can get Aaron Jones in a second. Should I do that? Another guy said, I can get James Conner in a third. Another guy said, I can get, DeAndre Hopkins in a second. And all these seem low, but you need a guy for the playoffs. It really depends on what your roster looks like.
My thing is you went the whole season without Christian McCaffrey, basically, and you're a playoff team. So what were you doing before Christian McCaffrey that was working? That's the first thing I'm looking at. Second thing I'm looking at is, okay, do I have a rebuilder or a one-year punk guy that I could sell him to for a late first or a trio of seconds or something worth it? If I'm not getting what I want for him, he's going on my IR and I'm holding him. I'm honestly buying him everywhere. Even as a contender, I'm buying him. I'm buying him and I'm going and buying James Conner for a late second. I'm not selling Christian McCaffrey for James Conner. I'm buying James Conner and keeping Christian McCaffrey. And that's what you should be doing. Because this is a guy that can win you your league single-handedly. Mm-hmm. I know he's older. I know he got hurt. But he looked absolutely phenomenal against Buffalo. Like he was going to drop like 30. Like he looked like
he was
CMC. Yeah. I think he's PCL. It's not ACL. It's not Achilles. I think it's going to give him more time for his Achilles to heal. He's going to have the whole offseason now. He's going to be, 29 years old. He got that massive contract extension. He's tied to San Fran. Like, he's not going anywhere. I think this is an opportunity like the rest of them. Like, we saw what Aaron Jones with all these injuries. We saw a lot of these veteran running backs discounted. Saquon Barkley had a bunch of injuries, and look at what happened this year. Like, I don't know. I just think we have a buy window on a player that can win you your league. Yeah. Take advantage of it. The same goes with Rashee Rice. When Rashee Rice went down, we told you to start buying him everywhere because contenders were panicking, even though it was so early in the season. But, McCaffrey, I haven't seen a trade. I saw a trade before the injury, late first and a late second. I saw a late first and DeAndre Hopkins, and I saw Keenan Allen in 3 seconds. Those are some of the trades I saw before the injury. I haven't seen a single one yet. I'm sure they'll start coming out of the blue now. But
in the trade that I made, I feel like Zay Flowers is going to be worth more than Christian McCaffrey. But my wide receiver 2 is Deebo Samuel. And if we're going into the playoffs and I'm trying to ride it out with Deebo, he has been horrendous. Now, I'm totally with you. I'm in 21 leagues. Snoog, the nice thing is right now, 20 of them are either in the playoffs or the 101. And then there's one league where I don't have, 19. One league where I don't have the 101 and one where I'm just like right there. Like smash 8 just seems to be my Achilles heel. But I made offers for Christian McCaffrey in every single one of them to buy. I've offered James Conner in a third. I've offered Isaiah Pacheco straight up. I'm making offers like that, guys that need that, because some of those guys in your situation, like we talked about, if you're in the playoffs and you're already set and you don't need him and you haven't used him all year, there's no reason to get rid of him for nothing. If you have a trade deadline, I definitely want to buy an asset. I want to make sure if you're void of picks, it's going to have to be McCaffrey. If you have a second, it needs to be Connor or Aaron Jones or one of those guys, or maybe even Isaac Guerrendo. So Isaac Guerrendo is an interesting case, right? Because everyone's like, I got Jordan Mason, I'm set. Sometimes in the playoffs, especially the fantasy playoffs, it's not the backup. It's the backup to the backup who wins you a title. We've seen it in years past with just random Joes. Like we've had guys just pop up. Amir Abdullah seems to show up every single year in the fantasy playoffs, or, Penny or guys like that. Just they just show up because we're on third string running backs. Mason's done. He's on IR. Christian McCaffrey's on IR. It's now Isaac Guerrendo season. And Isaac Guerrendo comes in.
Jerick McKinnon was the one that was crazy.
Yes, that's
30-point games.
Yeah. And you have those every year. Now you've got Isaac Guerrendo. If you're in redraft, you dump your entire fab. If he's somehow available in Dynasty, you dump your entire fab. I personally would pay a late second right now if I really had Christian McCaffrey and I really wanted to go all in, because he has a juicy schedule. There are very few opportunities where you get a guy who he's averaging 5.9 yards per carry, Snoog. He is, has 4.3 40 speed. We didn't love him coming out as a prospect, but damn, the situation is good. Like, he has 4 games left. 3 of them are home games. One's against the Bears. One's against the Rams. I think he's going to have strength of schedule. He has the 10th easiest strength of schedule left. I think Isaac Guerrendo is worth a 26 second. Like, that was me saying, I'm Ron Burgundy. Like, you're not going to. I don't want to pay a 25.
I wouldn't pay a second. I honestly,
no one's selling for a third, though.
If I don't need him, I'd sell him for a second all day long. Like, right now, that's what I'd be doing.
I think it's selling him, and
I'd be going and trying to buy CMC.
So, yeah, I mean, that would be the ideal trade, right? It's like you give up Guerrendo in a second and get Christian McCaffrey if you're going that way. And there's tons of opportunities. This is why a lot of you guys in the Discord and guys on Twitter have reached out, and they're like, hey, when is the best time to have a trade deadline? And the answer to that is never. There should be no trade deadlines in your fantasy.
I found an alternative that we've been doing in some of my home leagues, and it's once week 15 starts. So like right when kickoff starts for that first, what is it? Probably a Wednesday night game, or is it Christmas, or is it going to be like a Thursday night game? Whenever that first week 15 game starts, our trade deadline begins. But the trade deadline is so playoff teams can trade with playoff teams, and non-playoff teams can trade with non-playoff teams. And as soon as you're eliminated from the playoffs, you can trade with rebuilder teams. So that's kind of like I still don't like it, but that's kind of that was a middle ground we came up with, because we had a bunch of angry people that didn't, because there was a bunch of lopsided trades happening. Like, I think when someone gave up like a first and 3 seconds for Keenan Allen, and like, I forget who the quarterback was that was starting at the time.
The nice part is, So here's what I tell everybody, because a lot of you guys reach out to me and you're like, I know you commish so many leagues, I do these things, so why would you have a deadline? Why wouldn't you have a deadline? My bottom line is I don't have, and the same thing goes with vetoes. I don't have any vetoes. I don't have any deadline, because I trust the 12 people in my league, and if I don't, you're gone. I don't need you. You know what I mean? And how many times has the tides turned on an unfair trade across the 16 smash leagues in the playoffs? Maybe once, because we start to trust it, where value is value. You're going to get a little bit more. To me, your bottom dwellers get an opportunity to come up higher. And then they're able to get more, where your league gets more balanced, because the top guy, he's going to have to overpay when it comes to playoffs. And the bottom guy now has that opportunity to flip an Isaac Guerrendo, to flip a guy where he can become better and makes your league more competitive. And I think it promotes more trading, Snoog. And I get what you're saying on yours. It's just, what playoff team's going to trade with another playoff team? And then what, like the other two, it's fine. But for me, it's like, I want those bottom 4 or 5 guys saying, you know what, let's make a trade. Like, let's go ahead and let's figure something out here that works for both sides. Because I didn't make the playoffs. I'm the 7 seed. I don't want DeAndre Hopkins on my team. I don't want Keenan Allen on my team. Let's try to make something up there. And I think Guerendo's obviously a guy that, if you're rebuilding, you flip for sure. You add a third and get a second. You flip him plus Zay Flowers to get to George Pickens. You use him as a way to tier up just a little bit, and you can make those kind of trades. There's a lot of opportunity.
He's a really good looking throw-in right now. Like, if you see him as a throw-in. Yeah, if you see him as a throw-in, as a contender, you're like, okay, I like this. Like, I can start this guy. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you see that trade. So I like to use him as a throw-in to upgrade.
Yeah.
I'd like to use him with Garrett Wilson to get Nico Collins, or use him with,
I think you need a little bit more, but I'm with you there.
Use him with like a Marvin Harrison Jr. and go get like one of those guys, like a Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sure. Just stuff like that is like the type of moves I'd like to do, or go from Kenneth Walker to Saquon, or Kenneth Walker to Breece Hall, or stuff like that. So good things to think about.
And he gives you an opportunity to make those kind of moves. And I think we've really hammered home on, and if you look at both of our rosters, the amount of ownership we have of Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, and Aaron Jones. It's Chuba Hubbard. Like, these guys, we've been talking about the same guys all year. And if you've been listening to the show, you have them. You're already in the playoffs. You're not even worried about it. And that's where you start to make those kind of moves. I think if you can go out and get a Guerrendo, if you're really starved, I think he's going to produce. at an RB2 level, and I think if that's going to put you over the top, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that gives you a fair opportunity. We talk about guys getting opportunities and then taking off, and a guy that you and I both loved early in the process, and then we kind of soured a little bit, and then we came back, and now you can't afford him because now Bucky Irving's cost is through the roof. 3 games in a row, RB7, RB1, RB3. He has literally set the world on fire over the last 3 weeks. And now I'm seeing, I was playing one guy in Smash 13 and I'm rebuilding. And my team, it has 9 firsts. I was going for the 10th first. I was like, yo, Bucky, for your first. He's like, Bucky ain't worth a first. And then I beat him this week. Shout out Miju. I beat him this week with Bucky Irving going nuts. And he's out of the playoffs now. So sometimes it's like, man, you want to trade that first. And I was okay trading a first for Bucky Irving. We talked about that last show. It was Bucky. The time to buy Bucky Irving was 2 weeks ago. If you could still afford him last week, you do it. But now you're at a spot where you're like, ooh, this is crazy. Like the price on Bucky Irving is through the roof. I can't even tell you what people are asking because I put out a poll and I put it out there. Where does he belong in your dynasty rankings? Most people right now say it's Gibbs, Bijan, A-Chain, Saquon, Brees, and he's number 6. Now that's a 3. That's what most people were saying. Zoltan said, why would he not be top 5? Like even within that area with Brees. And I'm like, I can't get there yet. Like sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit behind the curve when it comes to a guy with low draft capital.
Yeah. That, and I get nervous. Like they still use Rashad White a ton. So what if they replace Rashad White with like a Travion Henderson or a guy that's better than Bucky Irving? That's what I get nervous about. But he's so good, man. I've been just reminiscing, going back through all my old receipts and all my old texts, and I had texts from like December of last year. Mm-hmm. Bucky's my clear RB1. Like Bucky is elite. Yeah. I was like. And then I started to really get on Blake Corum, and I'm like, it's Bucky and Blake for me. It's Bucky and Blake for me. It's Bucky and Blake for me. And then once you see, like, it was like once the end of March, April, it was like, yeah, Bucky tested like a 13-year-old boy in shorts. And that it was honestly the process that usually does matter for the running back.
It does. Like, and then the draft capital, like the draft capital didn't matter.
The combine and the draft capital in the situation is usually everything, and I didn't like any of it. I love the player. I love the film. He was graded as like, I think he was my RB2 when it was all said and done with film grade, and it was like a 1B with Corum, but it was a joke. Like his testing for how small he was, like Gibbs and A-Chain were these elite athletes, and so it was
This is the prime example of if you believe in a guy that you go ahead and you make insulated trades. Some of the trades that people were able to make blows my mind. You know what I mean? Like they were last week, and this guy said, please talk me out of this. Like, please tell me I didn't lose badly. He traded Zay Flowers for Bucky Irving in a first. That's going to stink because Bucky's probably going to pass him. A lot of people moved Bucky for Cooper Kupp because the other guy was a contender. Dude,
I love that.
That's crazy. Like
last night I gave up. I love this price. I think it was a great price. I gave up a mid-second, Najee, Jalen Warren, Jalen Coker for Bucky straight up.
Yeah.
And the kid was rebuilding, and he ended up flipping Najee and Jalen Warren for 2 seconds. So it was really 3 seconds in Coker for Bucky for the kid. That's like a selling point he sold for. And I honestly think I'm paying a first for Bucky, like a mid to probably a late. Probably a late. With this running back class coming in, he's probably a late.
The process for me that I say it every year, and then I get too excited, and I end up the second round should be loaded with running backs every single year. But then we start saying, oh, you know what? Let's go get Xavier Legette. Let's go get Roman Wilson, Trey Burton, Ben Sinnott, like all those guys at the end. Where you missed on Braylon Allen, you missed on Bucky Irving, you missed even on Guerrendo, who was falling into that area. Like where those guys, you had an opportunity to flip Braylon Allen for a mid-second at one point, or even an early second. You had an opportunity, Bucky shot up like crazy. You have an opportunity with Guerrendo right now. You have an opportunity potentially with Kamani Vidal coming up, where like process really has to line up a little bit. I end up I'm like, well, that guy got day 3 draft capital, like that running back. The running backs are going to get opportunities. So especially if you're rebuilding, like I've always fallen towards let me take the wide receiver instead, but sometimes that ends up burning you. Like this particular guy, he traded Tajay Spears for Bucky in a second during the draft. Like when you make these kind of moves, this guy got McBride, Dell, and Irving for Ingram and Chase Brown like 2 weeks ago. Bucky Irving straight up for Keon Coleman when Keon Coleman had like 3 big games. Random 25 second after week 1 for Bucky Irving. These are the type of trades. Bucky Irving, oh my gosh. The guy was rebuilding, and he got Bucky Irving for Desmond Ridder and a pair of thirds early in the season. Bucky Irving for Javon Baker during the draft. That one probably wouldn't have felt right, but it's like that process has to line up a little bit more. And that's something I think we're going to continue to work on in the offseason. The one major advantage you have of being in the Smash Accept Discord is Snoog and I post all of our rookie rankings the entire way through. And yes, we're talking about, Bucky was a bit of a one that we did not hit. Our first round, if you look at it, Snoog, the only one that isn't worthy of what we put together was Xavier Worthy and JJ McCarthy. The other 10 were hits, and like we put them in the right order. We were telling you to take Bowers. We were telling you to take Neighbors. We were telling you to take Daniels. We were preaching, if you have Caleb, move back to Daniels plus. If you have Marvin, move back to Malik plus or Bowers plus. And those are those scenarios where $5 a month in the Smash Accept Patreon literally is going to feed your family with Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers is killing it. I have 0 Marv shares because I moved every single one back to those guys plus, and I think we're going to continue to talk. I'm excited about the offseason. Like we're getting into the playoffs, but Snoog, that's where you and I am. That's our bread and butter. That's where we make our money. That's where you guys joining the Discord, just $5 a month in the offseason. You talk about a 5-month offseason for $25, but if you're able to 5x your money off of that, like that's literally how it's done. So I just put out my recent dynasty buys. I put Bucky at 110, but I feel like I'm too low. I feel like he's got to be, like everyone started coming at me 1.7. Like that's people are saying, they're starting to say in the Discord and on Twitter after that comment, he's worth 2 firsts. And if I can get 2 firsts for Bucky, I'm going to do that. I think that's something you got to jump on there because he is a smaller back. He did leave that game with a back injury, and I love the player, but if you have him right now, Snoog, if you have him as a contender, if you have him as a rebuilder, what are you doing? Because my rebuilding ones, I'm trying to pair him with another wide receiver to get elite, or I'm trying to get a first round plus, like if I could get a first, I think you could flip him straight up for like Roma Dunze in a sec, or Rome in a first for Bucky in a second. Like, I think that's what you can do right now, which is mind blowing.
Hear me out. I'm holding him in every league I have him, and I'm buying him right now for as cheap as I can get him. If I can get him for a late first or less, like some seconds, and throw in valuable guys like I did, like Colker, Najee, Jalen Warren, Tajay Spears type of players. If I can do something like that, go look at the Buccaneers schedule the rest of the season.
It's the best. It's number 2.
If he has his Amon-Ra St. Brown stretch, which he already is started, and he's gonna, I think there's gonna be people that solidify and cement him in the top 5, and you're gonna get 2.5 first for him. So I'm making the bet on the playoff schedule, the talent, the player, the situation, the hot streak he's on. Because no matter what, say he puts up 15, 12, 18, 9, and like 16 the rest of the season.
Yeah.
He's worth what he's worth right now because he's a rookie. He's 22 years old. He had a top 15 season. Doesn't matter. He's not losing value unless he literally tears his ACL somehow, which you never want to happen. So I hope that doesn't happen. Or get some bad injury, or just absolute stinker and starts putting up like 5, 4, 7, 9, and Rashad White starts ripping, which isn't going to happen either. So
a lot of people
he's guaranteed to gain value.
Yeah. A lot of people think it's just 3 weeks, but it's RB12, RB16, RB18, RB40, 7, 3, 1. And now he has a hip injury, but he has week 14 is Las Vegas. Week 15, and that's a middling range. Week 15 is tough against the Chargers, but week 16 and 17 against Dallas and Carolina, if you're a team with a bye, I am advocating strongly to go after and buy him. If you have that round, that week 15 kind of playoff option, that's a little bit trickier. I think I would be buying Bucky. I'm buying Rachaad White because I think if Bucky's hip injury goes down, Rachaad White will be a RB1 the rest of the season because I think and Sean Tucker's a guy to get real cheap. I traded Hunter Henry for Romeo Doubs and got Tucker thrown into the deal because it was a rebuilding team. Always get a guy like that thrown into a deal. Start thinking 2 spots ahead right now, not just the backup running back, but that third guy. Who's that guy that's going to jump up and give you a random week like Sincere McCormick or what was the dude's name? Like he came out of nowhere. I'm like, what was that? McCormick. And now he's back on the practice squad. But I think thinking 2 spots ahead, I don't want to be carrying 12 wide receivers. I don't want to be carrying those guys that are going to literally, the DJ Charks, the Mike Williams. If I can somehow get involved in a trade and get a third running back, get one of those guys that might jump in, I think that's your opportunity to kind of go in there and shine, get yourself a running back. If you are going after Bucky Irving, and I'm trying to pull him up on Keep Trade Cut here because I want to see some recent trades. I want to see some rankings. I want to see where things are at. I had him as my RB13, and 2 or 3 people laughed at me last week. They were like, this is just dad's off his rocker. Like this is not the type of, principle that we're talking about. He has low draft capital. He's a small guy. Now all of a sudden, I think you have to put him in your top 10. I have him. I think I have to have him. I mean, if you go off of my current rankings, would you rather have him or Kyron right now? And it's like, you have to say Bucky. Like you just have to. Would you rather have him?
I have him in a tier. It's a big tier, but I have him in a tier with Kenneth Walker, JT, Joe Mixon, Kamara, Kyron, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey's out of that.
Keep Trade Cut actually has him as RB11, but I think, he's in that James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams. I prefer they have Kenneth Walker as RB7. I don't buy it because I believe
in the talent, but the Seahawks can't run the ball
8 weeks in a row.
Life.
And it's like if I have Breece Hall, I offered Breece Hall for Bucky and a mid-first in one of my leagues where I'm contending because I'm like, Breece Hall scares the heck out of me.
One of those things I want to be ahead of the curve.
Down.
It's one of those things I want to be ahead of the curve with Bucky, so I'm putting him high now because worst case, it's like okay, he slows down, he doesn't finish the season off that good, he loses a little bit of value maybe, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But what is JT doing? What is Kenneth Walker doing? What is Henry's only losing value going into next year to the market, maybe not to us, but
Walker and Taylor were the biggest guys. If I could get Bucky in a second for either of them, I'm doing it right now. I'm just doing it. Now, James Cook and Josh Jacobs.
You could get Bucky in a first for Breece.
No. Yes.
For Breece?
I think that's what I'm trying to do.
I'm going to try that. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. Because running backs, what have you done for me lately? But
I can't stand Breece, dude.
Honestly, I think James Cook and Josh Jacobs are the guys to buy. They're the less sexier Bucky Irving right now. Because, let's be honest. James Cook and Josh Jacobs are absolutely cooking right now. Both of those guys are high-end RB1s rest of the season. I am totally in when it comes to both of them. And I think the weird thing is you can buy both of them. We're saying you might not be able to buy Bucky for a late first. I have seen James Cook go for a late first 4 times this week. He, since week 8, RB1, RB27, RB12, RB7, RB9. He gets the Rams this week. He gets the Patriots in 16 and the Jets in 17. He's going to cook.
Yeah.
Honestly, I want to get him wherever I can. And guys are like, you and Snoog always say wait, but if I can get him for anything 108 or later, I'm going to do it. Same with Jacobs. Like Jacobs right now has been on fire, especially in PPC leagues. He has been top 5 in 4 of the last 5. RB3, 22, 5, 2, and 5. He gets the Saints in 16. He gets Minnesota and Seattle in 15 and 17. So a little bit tougher sledding, but both those guys I'm willing to go all in on and try to cash in on those running backs if I lost to Christian McCaffrey. So I think I would rather it's so hard to avoid buying Bucky Irving, right? Because it's like that new sexy and everybody wants him. If you get a pair of 2s, do it. If you get anything 104, 105, smash it immediately. if it's nothing, if it's nothing super sexy, you don't have to move.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to think too, the 2025 draft class is going to come in. I expect at least 2 running backs in the top 10 of the dynasty rankings. At least. You had Gibbs and Bijan. I don't think there's a Gibbs level player in this class or a Bijan level player in this class outside of Junty. But I do think there's a ton of guys that could be like Bucky right now, could be like A-Chain last year. Like there's at least Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Amari Hampton, and Quinshad Judkins. Like those guys after Junty, I think should all be day 2 draft capital players that fall into that like top 15 to top 20 dynasty rankings instantly.
Oh yeah,
we've been saying this though.
We're gonna shuffle this like crazy though. I mean, like
it's gonna be a lot like 2020 in my opinion. Like 2023 with Bijan Gibbs, like Kendre was hurt. He came out hurt. Like Roshan wasn't that great. Bigsby got good draft capital to a bad landing spot. Like a lot of the guys got bad landing spots, but the draft got like Zach Charbonnet went early second, bad landing spot. So
I think the landscape is really going to get shook up quite a bit. But what we really got to talk about is James Conner got a contract. These guys are getting contracts later. I'm excited in the offseason because people are going to panic again on James Conner. They're going to panic on Aaron Jones, on Kamara, on Henry, on McCaffrey. So like we're going to be able to buy again soon, baby. We're going to just get all in there because everybody's going to get they're going to want that new hotness. They're going to want those new running backs. And dude, how many scenarios are where we talk about Trey Benson coming in and now James Conner is going to be done and Trey Benson was worth more than James Conner all year long? Not anymore. You got to flip-flop that. You know what I mean? It's like
same with Chuba and Jonathan Brooks.
Chuba had his
pretty good though.
Yeah, Chuba had his worst week yet, which I love Chuba. He's been phenomenal. And Brooks looked pretty flashy. So we might see a little bit of a change there.
I was going to say, is there a chance it's like the Bucky Rashad White flip?
Yeah. Can you see a scenario right now where you could get Bucky you could give up Bucky and get Brooks in a mid-first? Or, like that might be a play. Like there's so many scenarios to take a running back like who doesn't have that high draft capital. Because look at those other guys that are up there in the top. They have the high draft capital. They have the elite offensive coordinators. The Bucs offense, as long as Baker is cooking, is right up there. But Gibbs, Bijan, Saquon, all early draft capital. A-Chain, Breece Hall, same kind of thing. It's that next tier where I think you're right, where he belongs with Kyron. JT's fallen off the face of the earth, which really hurts. Walker's fallen off. McCaffrey's got to get way off of that. I think he's more down into tier 5.
I have Kamara and Mixon high in that tier for me. They're high because they have contracts. They're still elite.
Yeah.
Kamara and Mixon, if you look at all their like advanced analytics stats and metrics, I'm pretty sure Kamara is like averaging 2+ yards per out run. He's first in like every single receiving metric there is. Like he's just been so good. And he's had back-to-back weeks with penalties taken away. His bigger weeks, he would have dropped like 25 plus in 2 straight weeks. Against Atlanta 3 weeks ago, he dropped that wide open 70-yard touchdown. So he's getting the scoring opportunities. He's just been unlucky. And now Taysom Hill's done for the year. So I think Kamara is like, as much as he already has been a true league winner, he's a massive league winner now. They have the Giants this week. They have the easiest playoff schedule. I think they played Green Bay week 16, but week 15 and 17 are like absolute smash matchups for him. Same with Mixon. I mean, he has a tough schedule coming up, but like he's got the Dolphins in week, I think 15. And then he has the Ravens, who is another team that they struggle as a defense, I think. I think they'll be good against the Texans because of how bad the Texans' O-line is and how much pressure they're going to get. And it's probably going to shut the run game down a bit. But Mixon's been catching the ball a lot, and he gets his touchdown rate's ridiculous. So it's like these vets, you probably got players, some playoff teams that don't even really need him anymore. I have teams where it's like, who do I start? And it's like I have Derrick Henry, Saquon, Kamara, and Mixon, all these cheap veteran running backs that I got off season. And now it's like, do I even need them? Should I sell one of them or should I hold them? You could probably get a decent deal from one of those guys. because it's like they're looking at it like, okay, there's 4 weeks left. I don't really need him, and he's going to lose value next year. And I've seen it. I've done it. I've bought into players like that before the season ends. So that's something you can entertain as well. And like Aaron Jones too. I mean, he hasn't been great lately, but I don't know what the Vikings schedule looks like in the playoffs. But there's some good options. James Conner's got a good schedule. You could always go to the Chuba, Chase Brown, because Chuba has a pretty decent schedule rest of the season too. And then you got Chase Brown and Bucky. So there's some risers and there's some veteran risers that you can buy into for cheap.
Chase Brown's the guy I want to talk about because he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 since week 4, 6 RB1 weeks. He's coming off the last 4 of RB4, RB3, RB9, and RB10. And you could still have him for, if you're a contender, for your 111, 112. Like people are still, they're not charging more than a first. And I think, he's got Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland, Denver. I think Chase Brown with Joe Burrow playing the way he is a league winner that costs you less than a late first, and I think you've got to at least kick the tires because Mixon, Kamara, all those guys, they're gone. They're on a contender. Let's be honest. Like when it comes to playoffs, if once somebody loses, if you want to take a shot at them because they're there, but they're already on a contender. If the guy's rebuilding and he's holding on to Alvin Kamara, then he's just an idiot. Like he's missed his boat because you're playing with borrowed money. Then as soon as he gets hurt, you're screwed. Like if you're a rebuilding team with one of those guys, they don't belong on your roster. It's just that simple. Like there's really no reason that you should have them there. But guys that I said, that are cost less than a first, it's Buck less than a late first. We talked about Bucky. We talked about Chase. It's Jacobs, Chuba, James Cook, James Conner, Tony Pollard, even Najee Harris. When Jalen Warren's out, Najee Harris had multiple receptions. He looked really good. I think puts him into an area. Brian Robinson Jr. with Eckler on IR is another cheap option. So, there's so many options at the running back position. The best way to do it and the only way to get our proper sit starts. And Snoog, last week, I was 95% on running backs on FantasyGenius.io. So this is where you guys want to join the Discord. If you have not joined already and you're on the playoff fringe or you're in the playoffs, what better way than pay $5 and just say, you know what, Dad, Snoog, help me out. Should I start this guy or that guy? And
I'm already ready to put out my very early 2025 rookie rankings.
Oh yeah.
I'm already on top of that. I've been on top of it, especially for the running backs.
Right.
But I'm excited because that class, the rookies is when the threads come out, the tweets come out.
And we have a
really
show.
Do work.
We have a 25 first show for you guys coming up soon. Snoog and I are going to do a mock draft of how your startup should look right now, which is just so much different than last year. We have a lot of great things coming up on YouTube, coming up into the Discord, coming up on Twitter. So make sure you're following me at DynastyDadFF. He's at FF Snoog. Hit us up, patreon.com/smash accept, and follow us on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process. We're back.
That was a good one. I